Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. This is John Bona. Our discussion of global warming continues after the cold winter in 2013 and early 2014. Global warming has been a subject of discussion for decades now. Let's state the facts. The Earth has an atmosphere that brings both cooling and warming effects upon the Earth. There are warming effects upon the Earth, we know that. We're able to live here because our atmosphere retains some heat from the sun. If we had no atmosphere, the surface temperature would be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet because we have an atmosphere surrounding our planet, the average worldwide temperature is just below 60 degrees. You've heard of the greenhouse effect, that the atmosphere retains some heat energy that comes from the sun. But not all of the atmosphere does this. Nitrogen and oxygen that make up most of the atmosphere don't retain the heat from the sun. That's about 99% of the atmosphere that does not retain heat or function as what we call a greenhouse effect, greenhouse gas. The remaining 1% is made up of over a dozen elements, carbon dioxide being a small portion of that. Water vapor then is probably the most important greenhouse gas. It constitutes about 80% of the total warming effect on the entire atmosphere. We know that some clouds warm the Earth and some clouds actually cool the Earth. A low altitude cloud will mostly cool the Earth where it is, reflecting the sun's heat back into space. On a beautiful popcorn cloud day, you'll see a cloud pass in front of the sun. Of course, we feel cooler under that cloud. And then, of course, there are days where there's very high clouds up there, and they retain more heat because they reflect that back into space. So most scientists all agree that the combined water vapor, that's about 80% of warming, and clouds, the other 15%. About 95% of what is called the greenhouse effect, greenhouse warming. Okay, that's the warming side of the equation. So we know when this energy comes from the sun, the heat, in the form of light, the light will hit the surface of the Earth, and the Earth will absorb some of that heat from the sun, and then radiate it back in the form of infrared energy. That's what we call heat. And it's also very good the way God made it, so that it all doesn't shoot back into space, otherwise we would freeze. So we could be thankful that God's design, God's wisdom and creation of the earth and the sun and the atmosphere, everything that we have, is the perfect balance of incoming and outgoing energy. Sparing all the details because we don't have all that time, there are cooling effects too that will moderate the greenhouse effect. They call these climate feedbacks. They are things like precipitation, rain or sleet or dew or snow. These are basically the wind moving east and west, north and south. Things that we call weather. It could be a gentle rain or a very strong rain like a hurricane. These cooling effects from the atmosphere will actually cool the earth. But this is really not what is critical. What is important is that they balance together, so much that the average temperature is about 60 degrees on the planet the way God made it. But we know the radical environmentalists try to scare the people. But reports like the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, they presented a report at the UN Climate Conference, only to be kicked out of the conference for presenting it. The report was a massive compilation of scientific studies, both from NOAA and other organizations and sources. Together, they indicated claims of global warming, climate change, and climate disruption are nothing but a ruse to usher in massive carbon taxes and crippling regulations. And of course, our politicians, they are conditioned to react to any harsh weather potential event by scraping for higher taxes upon the people. Isn't it interesting that these weather predictions and higher taxes go hand in hand? So what is all this controversy about carbon dioxide, known as CO2? The people who blow the horn on global warming constantly argue that humans are causing the concentration of greenhouse gases, CO2. They're claiming that this increased concentration could warm the earth enough to cause catastrophic harm to people. But what is CO2? It's a odorless, it's a colorless gas. It produces bubbles in our pop. We know that carbon dioxide plays an important role in human beings. Our blood flow, our rate of breathing. When we breathe, we inhale oxygen and we exhale CO, carbon dioxide, in every breath. In fact, all of the animals and insects and just about everything you could think of will inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide in every breath. In addition, all the seas and the mountains, the volcanoes, all natural sources emit it too. Carbon dioxide is a natural way, the way God made the world to function. It's crucial for plants, you learned that in high school, because they need it for photosynthesis, a process that uses the light energy to produce compounds necessary for a plant to live and grow and prosper. Of course, we know during this process of photosynthesis, the plants absorb carbon dioxide and then release oxygen. Is that not cool? Think of this wonderful cycle that God created. Animals and people continually use up oxygen and then release CO2 for plants to use. And then plants, they use that CO2, that carbon dioxide, and they release oxygen for people and animals to use. This is essential to all the major life systems that exist on planet Earth. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant like the environmental wackos have made it to be. It's an essential part of what God's wisdom, God's infinite knowledge, and His arrangement of the earth and life itself on our planet. And folks, the coup de grace, it's very obvious. These environmentalists have caused fear with global warming. It's a bogus theory. I don't even know if it reaches a theory. It's just a hypothesis. It's a thought. It doesn't have any empirical data. It has no reliable data. And here's why I'm telling you. All of this bogus data that they've put into their computer models that predict the weather for many, many years in the future, all of these computer models used by the United Nations, for example, that Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, assume that climate feedbacks magnify warming that comes from greenhouse gases, and that is just false. It's important to understand here that these fears that the environmental people are predicting with global warming, these fears that they put in the minds and hearts of people that don't have the knowledge, this prediction of future weather is based on computer models that give different weight to different factors. These computer models, a lot of them are wrong. And here's the coup de grace, because they predict whatever data is fed into them. You put different data in, you get a different formula on different assumptions, and then different predictions. And that's what they've done. Therefore, these fears that they put into the minds of people that are not aware that there's a global warming on the rise it rests fundamentally on an assumption, a hypothesis, by a computer model with wrong data, not on empirical observation of the real planet Earth. Folks, God created a very strong earth, not a fragile earth, a very resilient earth. God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. God's design is perfect. So let me say, are we going to believe in infinitely wise, omnipotent God who sits in the heavens, controlling it all? Or are we going to believe some radical environmentalists creating bogus data, putting it in a computer model to convince you there's something happening that isn't? Well, for me in my house, it's a no-brainer. God has promised to maintain stability in seasons and the oceans. God bless you, and thank you for joining the Story of Liberty in our continued discussion on the environment.